We're going to be talking to Dr. Tim Ball, a renowned environmental consultant, former climatology professor at the University of Winnipeg. Dr. Ball employs his expertise background in climatology and other fields as an advisor to the International Climate Science Coalition, Friends of Science, and the Frontier Center for Public Policy. They've called for his arrest in England. I mean, they've said that he and Lord Monckton and others should just be arrested. Cass Sunstein, the new regulations czar, says arrest people if they deny climate change. So now, all these tens of thousands, I mean, it's 30-something thousand sent letters to Congress, top scientists, climatologist, hydrologist, meteorologist. And Al Gore said that testimony won't be allowed. His friends in the Democratic Party said no, not allowed. And he said the science is settled. No one disagrees. And Obama said that in his speech 2 nights ago at the State of the Union. He said, you know, there's no question. So we're going to Dr. Tim Ball here in just a moment to talk about all those issues with him. Now, we know this is all based on fraudulent science. It's publicly admitted with their own internal emails, and now more than 10 news scandals where the whole UN, all the universities they use, all a tissue of lies and fraud, with them caught red-handed lying on purpose. I mean, this is like somebody calling the fire department and saying, my neighbor's house is on fire, and then the fire department pulls up and there's no fire, and they see the guy laughing saying, I lied. I mean, he gets arrested for a false report. I mean, there's no doubt we have them red-handed, but they're not going to stop. So I wanted to read this because this is the new angle. In England, the EU, their own government, common purpose, in Canada, in the U.S., in Europe, in Japan, the federal governments and the UN are just openly funding the cities and the banks and the federal money to seize houses, seize property, shut down power plants, huge boondoggles to Al Gore and others that own these windmill companies that you lose 2.2 jobs on average every time you fund them, and they cost $700,000 per green job they create. So as they kill your economy, they say, Maury Strong's system to destroy industrial society, it will give you jobs. And so, yeah, 1 out of 100 or so, they do get a job as enforcers of the destruction. Meanwhile, China is the new industrial haven where everything's authorized. So no one else is allowed to manufacture. This is really mercantilism, but China and a few of the third world countries. They're bringing back mercantilism. You know, the colonies couldn't produce anything that was a value-added good, only raw cotton, tobacco, things like that, corn, wheat. That's how the British and French empires operated. Mercantilism was developed 400 years ago into the system and is now to keep only certain elites in power. That's what this fake environmentalism is. So we're going to Tim Ball here in a minute, but I wanted to start into this article from prisonplanet.com. It's only been out for about 2 hours. I'm asking everyone, especially in cities where it's happening, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, L.A., New York, Boston, you had better, Miami, small towns, they're doing it. And I mean, there's UN representatives. The feds are here. I've been to the meetings. They laugh and admit it. Home inspectors taking your property. I mean, it's already been hell here in Austin. The former mayors openly take the property later they took. I mean, it's just walled. It's like Geithner's thieving. Cap and trade scam to be enforced at state level. And earlier I read to you on air all of the mainstream news articles out of Bloomberg, you name it. I'll show you some of those coming up. They're here in my stack. I need to dig them out. Where they admit, okay, they can't get it at the congressional level with the Senate. They can't pass this tyranny. So they'll have the EPA at the federal bureaucracy do it, and they'll have local governments do it, and international governments come in and fund your local government. So foreign governments coming in with a $2.6 million tax, $2.6 billion tax in Austin alone. Globalist intent on ushering in a zero-growth post-industrial society or bypassing the federal government's stuttering efforts to implement the cap-and-trade scam and going directly to the states in an effort to impose their control-freak tax on every life-giving gas that we all exhale, carbon dioxide. And it just goes on and on. It says the Austin Energy, which powers the city, presented to the city council Austin Energy Carbon Reduction Plan, which goes even further than the federal cap and trade bill in calling for CO2 emissions to be reduced by 20%. The fact that the energy companies are behind this, again, disproves the flawed notion that the oil and electricity companies oppose the global warming movement. No, they get all the money to put in the windmills. And then it's taxes on natural gas, it's home inspections. I mean, folks, I'm going to read more of this later. I want to go to Dr. Tim Ball while I dig out my other stories I wanted to go to. But I mean, this is so diabolical. And when I tried to tell Dr. Tim Ball during the break about this, he said, yes, I know, Alex, but it's all based on fraud. And I know that, and he knows that. But you got to go to your city councils and say, this is all an admitted, bona fide scam developed by Enron and the UN. It's just so amazing. Climatologist Tim Ball, thanks for being here with us.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thanks for the opportunity and a very good summary of what's going on. And I've watched them hijack climate science as the vehicle. And as we've talked about before, going back to the Club of Rome, where they state that global warming is going to be the vehicle that they'll use to take control. And we're seeing that. And now, even though the biggest scandal, and I think without hyperbole, the biggest scandal certainly in science history and possibly in world history, where people at all levels of government have been involved, and the IPCC and so on, and yet it's virtually being downplayed and pushed aside as, you know, as somebody once said, it's like the policemen say, no, nothing going on here, move along. And it's absolutely incredible. And I think what people need to think about, Alex, is if this level of malfeasance and sheer criminality occurred in any other discipline, I mean, the people would be locked up instantly. And if it occurred in medicine, for example, even a fraction of it, but somehow they're able to gloss it over and pretend that nothing's wrong, and then the latest game is, oh no, the fundamental science is still okay. In fact, John Beddington, the head of the UK science group, saying this. Well, no, it isn't. That's the whole point of what the skeptics were trying to point out.
There's now universities, governments admitting thermometer fraud always to make it look like it's hotter, caught red-handed in Canada, the U.S., New Zealand, England, Russia, and we have the UN documents where they went in the mid-'90s and recruited these key universities to unify the fraud. And Bill Santer, the head of the UN program, admitting they took out all the scientists out of their report in the mid-'90s, saying man isn't doing this. And Pachauri making money off shutting down factories and relocating them to India, and admitting they lied in the report about the melting of the glaciers in the Himalayas, admitting, oh, we did that to scare you. I mean, they just red-handed fraud everywhere. Al Gore making money off of it. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, just all of it.
Alex, and Pachauri himself, he's made a huge amount of money. And in fact, the scientist that was quoted by a reporter as saying that the glaciers in the Himalayas will be gone by 2035, he works for Terra, which is owned and run by Pachauri.
Exactly. It's all come out that every major scientist, whether it's the flu scare, the economists hired for the takeover of healthcare, all the major scientists and spokesmen are all on the payroll of the carbon traders.
Yep.
I mean, it's just total fraud out in the open.
Right, and I watched it, 30 years ago. There was a guy named Tom Wigley, and he was the guy that took control of the Climatic Research Unit, which is where all of the rot was centered from the climate science point of view. I'm not talking necessarily now about the political side of it. That was Morris Strong and the UN and the IPCC. Well, Wigley and Jones is now, been pushed aside as the head. Those two attended the first meeting in 1985 to set up the IPCC, and then they provided the science that Strong and his gang needed to push this whole agenda of carbon and the CO2 is the problem. And Wigley was the bagman, and if you read the emails, he's the go-to guy. He's the grandfather, almost like the mafia. And when you read the emails, they're saying, look, we got this problem, and he's telling them how to run it and how to deal with it. And he's the guy that's getting editors fired. Well, then he moved to Canada, probably arranged through Environment Canada and the assistant deputy minister here, and he got into more funding in Canada. Then he moved to NCAR, where they just had a big retirement party for him, attended by all the CRU people and all of these gangs. And so much of the funding was going through NCAR in Boulder, Colorado. And in fact, a lot of the funding going to the CRU was from there. So these guys were controlling the government funding that was going to perpetuate the bad science. Meanwhile, what they were doing was then being used. The IPCC reports then became the documents of faith for governments around the world pushing the whole carbon and energy agenda.